Hello, Black Like Me family, and welcome back to another Black Like Me podcast redrop. As kids all across the country go back to school this week, we wanted to bring you one of our numerous episodes about education. In this episode, Dr. G has a conversation with Eric Washington, a young African-American man at the University of Wisconsin here in Madison in the education program. Eric talks with Dr. G about what it was like doing his practicum in schools in Madison and relates an important and revelatory incident that happens. Prompted by hearing students in his second grade class talk about Black Lives Matter and All Lives Matter, Eric decides that he is going to teach a unit on that. He talks to his teacher. He starts with the issue of redlining and blockbusting, but then gets prompted by the students to talk more specifically about what Black Lives Matter means in the current context, and that is police brutality. Because of this, he is asked to leave the school. Eric talks about this incident, other aspects of his practicum, as well as his eventual placement with an African-American male teacher who helps him learn how to navigate the process of becoming a black teacher in a predominantly white school and being authentically himself, authentically black, and authentically oriented towards change. Because Eric is a student in the education department, it highlights the important and fragile moment in the process of developing and getting folks of color in schools. I think there's a lot of really interesting things that this conversation brings up. Dr. G also talks to Eli as well to get his comment on the situation. Hope you enjoy.
Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G, a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, good folks. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. One of the things that I hear people lament from all walks of life is the lack of black school teachers as role model in classrooms today. Recently, I met with a young man who's finishing up his undergraduate degree at Wisconsin, and he talked to me a little bit about the pushback he feels that he gets when he tries to bring all of himself, culturally, ideologically, philosophically, to the classroom. And he talks about that experience, and he just honestly just says that those experiences are part of the reason why black people don't want to go into education. This is eye-opening. This is a 22-year-old, I think he's about 22-year-old who's talking about his experience and its practicum as a student teacher. And I just want you just to have your eyes opened by this experience, because I think it gives us insight as to why we don't have more students of color going into education to become teachers of color. My guest is Eric Washington Jr., and he is a future educator. He's a gentleman who is finishing up his undergraduate work here at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, my alma mater, in elementary education. I invited him into the studios because I want to have a conversation with a young African-American teacher about education, his experiences at UW-Madison, his thoughts about education reform, and just how he views the world. And so, Mr. Washington, thank you so much for being on my podcast today.
I'm honored and thankful to be here, man.
Yeah, I'm glad. Now, you've listened, so you know I do Black Icebreakers.
Of course.
Now, they're designed for older folks, and so I'm after this show, I might need you and some others to help me add some younger ones for your generation. But a couple are still pertinent, young man. Let me start off by asking you, growing up, or even now, because you're still growing up, grits or cream of wheat?
Grits, 100%.
Grits, 100%? Okay,
yeah.
all right. You put butter on them?
Of course.
What comes after the butter? Sugar, salt,
butter, a little pepper.
A little pepper.
And a little salt.
And a little salt.
Yeah.
Got you.
Butter, a little pepper, a little salt.
Okay, that's kind of a southern way to eat that.
Mom's from South Carolina,
Okay.
Orangeburg, South Carolina.
All right, okay,
Yeah.
I got you. I figured that came through for the parents. Now, does your dad put salt on them too, or does he do sugar? Your dad looks like he should put sugar on his
He's a
grits.
big pepper guy, so he puts
Is he
a
really?
lot of pepper, yeah.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just see. Let me see what else. Now, you're from a younger generation, so you don't know anything about ironing blue jeans. That's a foreign
No,
concept.
no, I don't know.
See, that's right. So oh my goodness. Let me see what else. You're too young. You never had a Jerry curl. You don't need one.
I'm sorry. I'm good with that one.
You good without. All right, let me just see. Did your mom or dad have relatives that they took you to visit who had plastic on their furniture? You ever see anybody's living room or front room with protective furniture on the sofa?
Oof. I cannot recall.
Okay, that's kind of an
recall,
old school
Yeah.
black thing that is really funny. Let me see. You're still young, but this is fun. Let's see. Do you have any cousins named Mookie, Junebug, John, Lil Maine?
No cousins named those names.
No, those sound like rappers too. You hear they probably think, well, what label are they on? Those probably sound like. All right, can you swim?
Of course. I can swim. Yeah.
You can swim. Let me see what else. This is so funny because some of these, you might have to ask your parents about. Have you ever heard your parents talk about the term tenderheaded? No. What are we teaching our children? Oh my goodness, no. Let me see what this is. This is funny. So this is a generational thing because when older black folks are asked these questions, we just kind of start laughing about this. When you had a cold growing up, did your parents or grandparents use Vicks Vapor Rub on you?
Oh, of course.
Okay, on your chest, on your nose. Did they ever make you eat it?
I can't recall if they made me eat it, but I definitely remember Vicks Vapor Rub.
You
being part of the
definitely remember
equation.
that. Oh man. Okay, let me see. Man, this is awful. Did your parents make you scratch their back when they're growing up? Did you have relatives that say, "Come here, boy, and scratch my back. You got good fingernails. Scratch my back. My back is itching right here."
You know what? It was a little bit of the scratching in the back, but it was a lot more massages.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, they were spoiled. That's bougie.
Yeah.
That's spoiled.
It's a little bougie.
Yeah.
My sister especially would always ask me for massages.
Really? You're like, okay, listen, you need to go get somebody else to do that. Let me see if there's anything else. Man, this is too old for you. This is about Mr. Ed. This is about Gilligan's Island. This is about Sesame Street. You don't know nothing about this. Man. All right, growing up, did you have any fake cousins?
I probably have over 100, 150 fake cousins.
Now, how long did it take you to realize that they were not your real cousins?
Honestly, a while. So my family, we have we belong to this community of people, and we have a house in Highland Beach, Annapolis. Very historically black neighborhood community with
Dang,
a
I'm
lot of
jealous.
black history.
Yes.
Actually, Frederick Douglass had his beach house in Highland Beach. And
Really?
So, yeah. So a lot of the community members who grew up there ended up uncles, cousins. I would always call them Uncle Nat, Auntie Mona. And so I always assumed that they were my real aunts and uncles, probably until I was about 10. But there was definitely a period of time where I thought I had just a large...
You're like, I got a big family.
Yeah,
and you thought that was a family reunion when you went back
100%.
to... Man, did you get spanked growing up?
Yes. I did.
Syllable spanking? Do you know what a
did.
syllable spanking is?
Not often, though.
When you did get it, was it you ever heard of a syllable spanking? Like when they say, "Didn't I tell you not to play with matches?" Did you get timeouts?
I got timeouts. They never worked.
They never worked.
It would always be like, sit here for 30 minutes, and then I would, look sad, and then
they would
they'd be like, "Oh, okay.
Go outside. We're so sorry."
Exactly.
Did you go to public schools growing up?
I went to public school for elementary school. Yeah.
Was now you're from the DC area, so it's easy to assume that your school's predominantly black. Is that true? Was it?
No. So
was it fairly? And with it being DC, could be fairly diverse too.
Yeah. So I mean, my public school for DC was not diverse. I will say it was not diverse. It was predominantly white. There were a few black and brown folks, but I'll say so. I live in the part of DC that is closest to Maryland, closest to Chevy Chase, Maryland, Bethesda, Maryland.
Sure.
Very wealthy pockets of Maryland. So a lot of the students that I went to school with were predominantly white.
Okay. All right. That's interesting, man. Thanks for participating in those icebreakers. And hey, off the air, I'm going to need a couple of suggestions from you. So as I'm having younger folks, I want to be able to use things that's a little bit more recent than Gilligan's Island or ironing blue jeans. But you should ask your dad about Jerry curls and ironing blue jeans. You should ask him about that. So you're finishing up your undergraduate degree here at Wisconsin. First of all, let me just back up and say that, Eric, I met your dad a couple years ago in New York City at a judicial justice conference. He was presenting because he was a judge at the time. At the time, I believe he was the chief judge of D.C.'s Court of Appeals. But he also talked about his past work as being a part of the Conference of Chief Justices. In fact, he chaired that. So that's a council where the chief justice of each state comes together. And he was appointed by President Obama to chair that team of folks. So he was presenting. And I went up to him at a break and just told him I enjoyed his presentation, and I was from Wisconsin. And we found out that we had some organizations and some fraternities in common. And he said, my son's at Wisconsin. I said, get out of here. My daughter's at Wisconsin. And I think you were just about to start that year, or maybe just part of your freshman year. And so your dad and I connected when he came to Madison. He looked me up and we connected and he introduced us. So you grew up in D.C. How'd you get all the way to Wisconsin? I mean, there are a lot of, I'm glad you did, but there are a lot of good states and schools that you jumped over to come here. Did you have friends who went to Wisconsin, or what made Wisconsin stand out to you?
Yeah, multiple things. I think one, just knowing that Wisconsin was, a well-regarded, world-renowned university with a very solid education program, top in the nation. And a lot of fun too. I came from a high school that was big in a school spirit, and I was the booster club president.
Oh, are you
of the
okay?
Fan club. So I was the guy on the front lines, making sure the crowd was rowdy and all that stuff. So I wanted a school with a lot of school spirit, with a lot of enthusiasm and energy, and a lot of fun too. Sure. Yeah.
Man, that's really great. And so you knew from high school that you want to be a school teacher? So you came here aware of Wisconsin's School of Education program?
So it was always in the back of my mind. So I always knew that I enjoyed working with young people. And so it wasn't necessarily that I went into Wisconsin thinking I was going to pursue education. I actually wanted to pursue journalism.
Oh, really?
As a major, yeah. But it wasn't in high school, I had my first black male teacher. So it was until 9th grade, I had not had a black man as a teacher.
Wow.
And so in 9th grade, I had my first black male teacher. He was a math teacher, and I wasn't really that big into math.
Sure.
So even though his presence in that classroom helped me see myself as an educator or a potential educator, and also more importantly as a learner, I wouldn't say that, the fact that he was teaching math wasn't, kind of the most inspiring route for me to take.
Right.
But then I had my second black male teacher when I was in my senior year of high school, and it was in English. It was African American literature class.
Wow.
And so the teacher by the name of Jabari Sellers was the most passionate.
Wait, the Jabari Sellers?
I consider him the Jabari Sellers, but I don't know if he's the Jabari Sellers. The most passionate, energized, just hard worker, who really wanted to just see all the best for all of his students,
Sure.
And he definitely, being that black man, was looking out for the brothers and sisters in that classroom. And I went to a predominantly white private high school in DC, so having that representation was huge for me. And so after I took his class, I started to think, maybe I want to have this same kind of impact on the future generations of black and brown brothers and sisters. So
that's really powerful, particularly knowing that you have great parents. I mean, I bragged on your dad having been a part of the Court of Appeals in D.C., and your mom worked on the Hill as a lobbyist and as a vice president or some key role in UPS. This male teaching figure was not important to you because you lacked a father figure. Sometimes people think that's only important if you don't have strong father figures. You had play and fake uncles and cousins. You had strong men, strong black men in your life, but there was still a need to see someone who looked like you, who looked like us in the classroom.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I come from a family situation and a community where I have so many role models, and I'm very privileged because a lot of black boys and black girls don't have those role models in their life. And I come from a community where I have a lot. Let me tell you that. I have a lot of people to look up to. But the thing is, gain wisdom from, et cetera, et cetera. But the thing is, we spend so much time out of our, everyday life at school, especially, when we're growing up, And so that is definitely a large part of the social interaction and just just learning that is taking place is from our teachers, right?
Exactly.
And so, and let me say this: every person, doesn't matter your skin color, doesn't matter your background, walk of life, whatever. We need good teachers,
Right.
Right. And any teacher can make an incredible impact.
Sure, you're proof of that.
In a young person's life, any teacher. But there is something to be said for representation in our classrooms, right?
Definitely.
There is something to be said for, seeing someone who looks like you up in front of the classroom, who's passionate, who's so incredibly intelligent and bright, and who also, and you don't, there's also something to be said about, understanding and recognizing when you don't know things too. So you don't always have to be the most, intelligent knower of all things, but just being up there and being willing to learn with your students and being willing to experience discomfort with your students is important too. But, going back to that representation, seeing someone in front of the classroom who looks like you, who knows you,
Right.
a little bit, who knows where
Right.
you come from, right?
Right.
Is so important.
Right.
And I'm going into my first year of actual teaching coming up, but I've only spent, brief periods of time in the classroom, and I already see that difference. I already see I had a young black girl in one of my classrooms who just kind of kept staring at me. And
That's sad.
and
Beautiful, but sad.
yeah, beautiful but sad. And I was confused at first, right? But then, I developed a strong relationship with this student, and I could just tell she just needed
Right.
someone to be with,
Right.
someone that looked like her, someone that could care about her. Yeah, so
Sure.
representation, I will say,
Sure.
definitely matters.
I told you as we were prepping for the show that many of my listeners are white. We got communities like folks from Waterloo, Iowa, and Des Moines, Iowa, who are listening because they're taking note of what we're talking about. They're seeing this as an educational opportunity. And so what you're breaking down for the listeners, Eric, is you're not just saying, I feel safe because there's a black person in the room. They understand you. They understand your mode of thinking. They understand your background. They understand your potential. They understand that there are places where you may not have been pushed for your full potential just because there may not be a lot of black trailblazers in that area. So it's not just a matter of, hey, that person looks like me, I think I can learn. It's what white students have in classes all the time.
100%.
The teachers look like them. They understand them. They can relate to them. They know about their history. Not that there's a white monolith, but I know that people have missed that what you feel, or what you felt with what you described with Mr. Sellers is what white students get to feel all the time when they interact with people, whether it's a principal or administrator or a lawmaker, it's what they feel. So when we're calling for the hiring of more African-American teachers or whatever the representation needs to be, but you and I are talking, this is Black Like Me, so we're talking about black teachers. We really need schools of education. We really need school districts go out of your way and find these teachers because they're out there. Don't just say it's cold. No one wants to move to Wisconsin. They've got to find them because the racial disparity that we've experienced in Madison has a direct link, in my opinion, as a graduate of the school district, of not having enough black male teachers. I was about your age. The first time I had a black teacher was a social studies teacher and an art teacher, but it was a completely different experience. I had a black female in 4th grade, but having a black male teacher was a completely different experience. I connected with them, and my father was not in my life, so it was even more important to do so. But as I'm listening to you talk, I know that other teachers are listening. You need to put pressure on your school systems and say, whatever we got to do to go and recruit. And you don't need this just for the black students.
Yeah.
Because students who are non-black need to be educated and exposed to the perspectives and teaching styles of folks that are different than them. So you're about to do your student is it called teaching placement?
Student teaching, yeah.
Student teaching. So middle school,
6th grade,
6th grade.
English and social studies.
Are you nervous?
A little bit. Not too nervous though.
Mm-hmm.
I taught for a brief period of time, 7th grade, English and social studies. So I got a little experience in middle school, know all the different hormones that are going on and all the different energies that are definitely existing in that classroom. But it definitely creates, a fun environment.
Sure. Do you catch yourself, or do you find yourself being tempted to say, well, when I was a kid, I mean, because you're still very young. Have you hit that age yet where you're realizing, boy, these young people need to calm down, or they're spending a lot of time on, on their smartphone devices? Like, are you making comments in your head that's making you think, I'm sounding like an older person?
I mean, I think the technological divide, even though my generation grew up in a time where, technology was innovating rapidly, is still great. These kids are addicted to their phones, addicted to their computers. And, while we're, as school districts and schools, we're trying to, the best to make sure that each student has their own Chromebook, for instance, in the Madison Metropolitan School District.
That's amazing.
1-to-1 Chromebooks. But I mean, and computers open up this whole, array of opportunity for the students, right? But there's definitely this addiction to the computer and addiction to gaming and especially that Fortnite trend.
Right.
All the kids are really into Fortnite, so it's definitely. I don't say when I was a young person.
We'll give you a year. We'll give you a year.
Yeah, exactly. Probably in a year I'll start saying that.
These young people nowadays, when you do that, you've arrived. You say, these kids nowadays out here. Do you feel like you'll be able to? I know you're doing your student teaching here in Madison, so we don't know, what the future holds. But do you feel like intellectually, culturally, experientially, you'll be able to bring all of you to the classroom? I mean, like, can you talk about issues of police brutality? Can you talk about issues of profiling of black men? Can you talk about the truth about racial divide? Not that that's all we talk about as black folks, but I'm just curious. These are real issues that all kids are facing. Do you think there'll be space in your classroom to talk about real life issues that these children can get ahead of?
Definitely. I mean, I think one of the most important aspects of the teaching profession, and granted, I'm a young aspiring teacher, but I think so far the impact you can bring to a kid by being your complete true self, right? Your complete transparent self.
Exactly.
And kids want to see that. And kids know if you're hiding something. Kids know if you aren't telling or revealing your true self, because
kids are sharp.
Kids are sharp. They know a lot more than you think they know. And so I 100% am going to, bring my full self and my full identity to, kind of my teaching practices, because that's who I am. And that's how the world shapes and affects me. And a lot of the students I'll be teaching at the new school are students of color, are black and brown students who are going to inevitably face the same challenges that I faced growing up. And so, when it comes to topics of police brutality, topics of racism, topics of politics, even, those topics are vitally important to address. And it's interesting. A lot of schools, especially here in Madison, since that's kind of my experience, we promote these liberal ideologies. We promote this, sense of Black Lives Matter at schools.
Right.
And we put up during African American History Month all these pictures of, black pioneers and lawyers and civil rights activists, et cetera, et cetera. And so we have that, kind of surface level approach to talking about these issues,
right?
But we don't take the step further. We're too scared, and we
give me an example.
So I mean, I was working at a school, and I won't name the school. I won't name.
Sure.
But I proposed that I teach a little unit about Black Lives Matter and what that really means.
Okay.
The school, has Black Lives Matter signs all over.
Oh, okay. All right. So you weren't being radical by wanting to talk about it.
They try and preach it, but they don't walk the walk, right?
Okay.
And so I propose. I heard a few students. Now, these were second grade students.
All right.
Talking about Black Lives Matter in a rather problematic way, saying, why don't all lives matter?
And
Why
these
is
are
it just
white
black
students?
lives? These were white students
In second grade.
in second grade.
Wow.
And
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so I heard this and I was like, okay, there needs to be some learning.
Sure.
Because that's the only way that we
Makes
can
sense.
remove ignorance is if we learn. And that's why schools are so important. That's why education is so important. So I proposed that I would do a Black Lives Matter unit, and I would phrase it through, kind of housing injustice. So redlining, blockbusting, talking about fairness and inequality and justice and injustice, etc. And so when I proposed that, even though I did say that, yes, along with that conversation about redlining, blockbusting, I also want to talk about police brutality. I also want to talk about, this obscene racism that's, so incredibly prevalent in this country. And so when I proposed that to the teacher I was working with, she immediately was concerned. She was concerned about what the parents would say of the white children.
Sure.
I would bet. She was concerned about what the principal would say. She was concerned about what the school district would say. And I was a little discouraged. I thought, we have young black boys and black girls, as young as Tamir Rice.
Exactly.
Being shot on the street.
Come on now.
And
what do we say to them?
What do we say to them? And what do we say to the black boys and girls in this classroom who have to learn?
Right.
Who have to learn, whose parents are teaching them about the injustices.
They're having the talk.
They're having the talk. And so if they're having the talk, why isn't everyone having the talk? And especially in a time when, we have Trump as our president who is, speaking these incredibly divisive and polarizing this rhetoric, this obscene rhetoric. And if we don't provide another narrative for these students, they're going to hear that and they're going to internalize that rhetoric. They're going to internalize what is being projected to them in the media, and they're not going to have a solidified understanding of, think concepts like racism, concepts like police brutality, concepts like, So
you're talking about having the talk with some of the folks who could grow up to perpetrate some of what we saw in Charlottesville. We're saying no one had to talk. Most likely no one had to talk with those young white men carrying those tiki torches, talking about our country's being taken away. You're saying no one's having a talk with not enough people are having talks with the white men about these issues. They were shocked when they grew up to become white supremacists. And I'm not saying your second graders were going to become white supremacists, but white supremacists were all second graders at some point who did not have the talk.
Yes.
So they said
and
no.
They most likely provided false narratives of what's really going on.
And probably don't have close relationships with people of other ethnic backgrounds. So they're only leaning into the rhetoric.
Correct.
They don't have anything to counteract that with. So did you stand down after they told you not to do it?
So interesting story. So I did a little reflecting, and I mean, so I was put in a difficult situation, right? So I was like, I don't want to overstep my boundaries.
Right.
I am not a teacher here. I am a practicum student.
Sure.
I am affiliated with the University of Wisconsin.
Right.
And I don't want to embarrass the teacher I'm working with because she was a great teacher.
Sure.
Let me say that. And I don't want to put anyone's job at risk.
Sure.
But I went into that classroom. I did my whole presentation on redlining, blockbusting, and then I started looking around at the kids. They were learning. They were enjoying the activity that we were doing. But I thought, this isn't what Black Lives Matter means in a modern context.
Exactly.
Exactly. And so I started to talk about police brutality. And
wait, please tell me the teacher was not in the room.
The teacher was in the room. The teacher was fully in the room, and I remember.
So you went all black on him up in that classroom.
I went all black on him, and I glanced up at the teacher, and she's not outwardly pissed off.
Was she red? Did she turn red?
She was a little nervous. And that's a commentary in and of itself. You know, that nervousness to approach these difficult conversations.
And a progressive community like Madison.
Yeah, and a liberal community like Madison. Right. So, and another thing is, because there was so much, or not necessarily backlash, but so much caution.
Sure.
With regards to having this conversation, I wasn't able to prepare properly.
Of course,
right?
of course. That's what I was just thinking. So
yeah.
you have to sort of wing it.
Right. So
but you're speaking passionately, I'm
exactly.
sure.
So I was speaking from the heart, but I had to wing that because I was told not to prepare this conversation. Sure. And so at the end, we kind of, we hit a surface level. I don't want to,
Sure.
depress these kids, even though the reality is depressing a little bit.
Sure.
But I had a conversation afterwards with the teacher, and she thought I went behind her back, and I was gone from the school for trying to talk about Black Lives Matter, something that we should be having a conversation about in every classroom, in every second grade classroom.
What did that feel
in
like?
America.
What did that feel like, Eric? Being released, because your family's investing in you. You're here getting an education. You don't want to backlash on your teacher, on the university, or yourself. But here you are, doing a student practicum, and you're released. So was your grade jeopardized? Is that part of?
No, my grade wasn't jeopardized. But
what did that feel like by just being authentic? Because we're saying we want more Black teachers like you. I'm from this school district. We're saying we will do anything to get Black students like you. You're not struggling culturally or emotionally, not academically. Your dad's a judge. Your mom's a lobbyist. You're from D.C. You grew up around upper middle class African Americans. It was not unusual for you to see Black wealth. You come to Madison and you epitomize what we say we're lacking. You bring a little of you to the classroom to not just help Black students. And why the hell not? I'm sorry, is your mom going to listen to this? Why the heck not help Black students? Because certainly we're talking about the trouble that they're in. So then you come, you share a bit of this because you want to help all the students understand these issues. Yeah. And because of a teacher's fear of backlash, you let go of that. I'm just doing a little editorial on it because I want people who are listening to understand this is where it begins to break down. So when we begin to wonder why is it that more of our Black students, why are they avoiding the School of Education? Why are they choosing to go the law school route, business school route, pharmacy route, pre-med or med school? Could it be because they're not sure that they can really become authentic in the classroom? Do you think there's any validity to that?
Oh, 100%. One, I felt like my voice didn't matter, and wasn't, supposed to be heard.
This is a Black male teacher, folks. I want y'all just to listen to this. This is a guy talking about the backlash of talking to students about a harsh reality that's dividing our country. We should be happy enough that you want to do this and you're ballsy enough to want to stand in front of young kids. I'm doing this, and I'm sure that it was in a professional manner because that's who you are. I know you, and I know of your family. But yeah, you felt like your voice didn't matter, and you're standing in the classroom to help all students feel like their voices matter, but particularly young Black students, because you knew what that meant to you to have someone like you in front of them. Man, that had to. Were you more hurt or embarrassed or angry? What do you think was the emotion you felt most? Most readily.
So two things. So one, right after that, I kind of laughed a little bit. And I know that's a weird reaction to have, but I was kind of like, I'm not surprised, right?
Really?
I wasn't surprised. Because...
Is that why you did it?
I did it because I think the kids deserved to have that conversation.
So it wasn't even just your agenda. Like they're going to understand what's happening to people like me.
Yeah.
You wanted them to understand the reality. They wanted to know what was going on in the world.
Exactly. And once I heard, not the most accurate truth surrounding that topic by the second graders, they want to talk about this. They're clearly talking about it. So clearly they want to have a conversation about it. So let's have a conversation about it. Mm-hmm. And let's have an informed one. Let's have a serious one. But let's have and let's have an uncomfortable one that, through class norms, through, the repetition of these difficult conversations, people can feel comfortable in. And to go back to one of your other points, schools, because of the lack of representation of Black and brown teachers, the students don't feel like school's for them, right?
Exactly.
That's how I felt.
Right, because I didn't push myself in high school, but I'm looking back and I realized greater representation would have helped. It would have really helped.
Hi, this is Jeremy Holiday, and I'm one of the editors of the Black Like Me show, and I just want to take a minute now to talk to you a little bit about Patreon. The show that we put together here is the culmination of an effort of a lot of people, and in order to do it, we need your support. We've been working for a while to come up with a Patreon that works well for people, and the levels that existed before, we recently added the $2 level, which is there for you if you like the show and you just want to give a little bit of support. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee. I mean, I don't think you can find a cup of coffee anywhere, or half a cup of coffee for $2. And we have a $6 level where you'll get a shout out on the show, a $10 level where you could submit questions to Dr. G and he'll respond to them, and then the $25 level, which is whenever we have a live event, you get a VIP invite, and whenever we start producing merch, you get that merch as well. So if you like what you hear on the show and you want to support it, go to patreon.com/blacklikeme and check out the levels to see if one fits for you. Now back to Dr. G.
Eli, let me bring you in for just a moment. Now, I'm trying to remember the age of your children. Are any of your children in second grade now, Eli?
Actually fourth. He just finished fourth grade.
Just finished fourth grade.
Yeah.
Eric talked about this experience of really being let go as a student teacher because he talked to the class about Black Lives Matter, because he's hearing comments from white males in second grade that shouldn't all lives matter. And so if you had heard that a young African-American teacher had referenced some of these in a very professional manner, would you have been upset? I'm just trying to think, was a teacher covering her own butt? Would parents have really been that upset? And I know you can't speak for every white parent, every place, but I kind of need you to play that on TV sometime. What do you think the teacher's thinking about? Is she concerned? Is she really that concerned about your students having a meltdown?
Probably not. I think it would be more of the image that's given to the parents and in the school. So in my experience, parents can be real sensitive for sure about their kids in school. So I think that's more what it is coming from, about what's going to get out there, about even a student says something to their parents and then that gets back around to the principal or back to them, and then they have to kind of deal with that.
Sure.
And so I think there is a lot of sensitivity to what's happening. So, I mean, I may be in a unique position or perspective, someone who would appreciate that coming to my son in school, but I think from a teacher's perspective, there could be a lot of sensitivity.
And I'm thinking, Eli, I mean, you and I know each other. I mean, you've been my engineer for a couple of years now, and we've known each other longer than that. But imagine what you and friends like you would do to have, a sharp brother like Eric in your classroom. Mm-hmm. And if students as early as first and second grade are saying things like, "Mommy, Daddy, the brown kids get in trouble. The brown kids." Mm-hmm. I'm not saying they said that at your kid's school, but parents have told me, friends have told me that's what kids are saying. Mm-hmm. You have a black male who's a teacher, teaching assistant, student teacher, who brings a different perspective, but he can't still bring himself to that. We then have this semblance or this image that we have diversity in the classroom, but we're having students who are future teachers thinking, I can't be authentic in the classroom, and that's why your schools can't become more diverse. So I'm curious, I know I'm catching you on the spot, Eli, but does this information of what Eric is saying help you to think differently about how maybe you ask principals of your children's schools about their process for trying to bring in black student teachers and black teachers? I'm just curious about whether or not you think this discussion is giving you a different insight as to maybe why there aren't more black teachers in your kids' schools.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, recently behind the scenes of the show, we were just kind of asking among kind of the producers if we had experience with teachers of color. And I couldn't think of any actually in my whole school career through grad school. I didn't have a single teacher of color. And so uniquely this year, Black History Month, my son's teacher in fourth grade really had a strong push for educating the kids even past that month about Black history and things, which was great. And she's a white teacher. And so that was really great. But it did still make me think that there's a different perspective. There was some students of color in his class, and I don't know what it was like in that environment, but I still, this conversation makes me think that it's not the same perspective of hearing that from a teacher of color in any of their experience, probably going through that.
That's wild.
You know,
So you had no black educators or educators of color from middle school, elementary, middle, high school, undergrad, graduate degree.
Yep.
So I'm the first black authority figure in your life?
Yeah, as far as the educational, I even took a African literature class, and
that was
still
white.
Not a teacher. He wasn't white. He was Indian descent.
He was
but yeah.
got you. Okay, all right. So now I know why you swear at me, because this is kind of a new arrangement. No, I'm teasing Eli. Thank you for stepping in and do that,
sure.
because I want our listeners to be able to hear part of what's going on. So Eric, you're saying you were not that shocked. So what made you re-engage? What made you re-engage in the educational process? Did you find a new school and a new setting? How did you re-engage and not just change your major and just say forget this?
Yeah, so I had worked with a couple white teachers in the past, and my first 2 practicum sites, great experiences.
Sure.
So my first one was an incredible experience.
Great.
I was at Sherman Middle School, great school, and I had an incredible time and learned from a truly amazing teacher and set of teachers.
Sure.
And so when this happened, I was a little fed up. And so I went to my program director and I said, please place me with a black person, preferably a black man, so I can learn how to navigate situations like the one I just had to navigate from someone who looks like me and who has to navigate situations like me.
So you are not just asking for help becoming a teacher. You wanted help navigating becoming a teacher.
Correct. And help navigating.
That's extra.
And help navigating the politics of the classroom.
Sure.
Right? And the politics of the school.
And did they do that?
And so I was paired with a black man, one of the few black male teachers in Madison, a man by the name of Kamar Stovall. Phenomenal teacher. And it was an incredibly rewarding experience working with him.
His parents were neighbors of mine. His parents were both school teachers. So for me, it's amazing to know that someone who I met, let's say we moved on that block when I was in 5th grade. So I would have been 9. So to think, neighbors I knew had a kid who'd be old enough, because he wasn't even born yet when we moved there, to think he'd be old enough to be the teacher you'd be assigned to. It's really incredible. But it also shows just this legacy of educators, having children who are educators, who are now mentoring future educators. It shows why we need black educators, because they keep giving. And the reason why I'm drawing the story out a little bit is that I want people who are listening to rethink educational systems, because this is what we've got. We've got to navigate, because the white teacher is protecting the white students. But black parents are thinking, I've got a black male in my child's classroom. Why can't they talk about real things that they're dealing with? And so if you can't talk about those issues that are real, that students are facing, then are we really educating all children? And aren't white students and other non-African American students losing as well, in addition to what African American students are experiencing? So this connection with Mr. Stovall was helpful. It was positive. Were you able to learn some of the navigating skills that you needed for the classroom?
Definitely a positive experience.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and he talked to me. I talked to him about what had happened at the last school, and he talked to me about the fact that, that might have happened, but you got to use your voice and you got to speak up and you got to tell people what happened. You got to go to the school board, school district meetings.
He said that?
And
he sounds
talk.
like his parents. He sounds just like his parents.
Yeah, because, silence is not going to get us anywhere. So
because, okay, so I just have to just process this again with you. And I know we're running out of time, but had there not been a black male in the system that you could be connected with, you would have missed that discussion.
100%.
You could have had a discussion with a well-meaning white person who could have said, well, Eric, I understand. But Eric, don't you, wouldn't you agree that all lives matter? Think about it, Eric. These are 2nd graders. And that's the talk that people have with us. The talk is be the nice Negro. The talk is don't bring all that angry shit up in here. Come on, dude. These kids need to understand math and get ready for 3rd grade. Whatever these big tests are, they're taking 3rd grade. But you had a brother whose parents were radical, and like his parents, Mr. Stovall has a cousin who's a part of our church, And she came to Madison through a program that our former governor, James Doyle's mom, Ruth Doyle, created to bring students of color here. So his parents were part of this effort through the University of Wisconsin in the 50s and 60s to bring black folks here to go into education. So one, I'm very proud that he's representing that legacy that Ruth Doyle and James Baugh and others from the University of Wisconsin worked out. I love it that you're still benefiting from that. But had he not been here, someone would have told you, tone it down. It's like what they told me, like with Justified Anger. Alex, don't you want to change the name? Couldn't it be Justified Action? It still has the same initials, J.A. How long are you going to be angry? And, I just got to tell you, as a white man, being angry is off-putting. Can't you find different words? And then people came at me from a spiritual angle. Is it right for a person of faith to be angry? So I'm in my 50s and people are trying to talk me off the wall. I am so glad that Mr. Stovall is in this community, that he didn't get fed up, because we know he's faced a whole lot of crap because he was raised by great educators, but they didn't take stuff. They didn't take no stuff. And it sounds like he's cut from that same cloth. But if he weren't there, someone would either say things to you in a way that would make you rethink your major, question your voice, or not even consider having a career in Wisconsin. And so I just want folks to understand that when we make noise about these experiences, it's because we as black people are trying to fight for our space to actually be here and to be relevant. And so he told you to keep using your voice, go to the school board, don't let them get you down. That is gutsy advice that only someone like Mr. Stovall could give. And now you're going to be in a position years later to give that same advice to people. But if people don't take their chokehold off of black education students, business students, if they stop telling us just to be nice and allow us to bring all of who we are to the table, we can help the society be more accepting, inclusive, and effective.
Yeah.
So how did that feel when he said that to you? Did it help you to realize you were on the right track, that even though you suffered the repercussion of having done that, but that indeed you did the right thing?
Oh, I felt empowered. I felt empowered after he told me that. And let me just say this.
Wow.
There's, in the School of Education, there are very, very, very few black people. And
how many are black males? Would you say less than 20?
So to my knowledge, there are 3 or 4. I know for a fact there are 3.
3 or 4?
Yeah, 3 or 4.
And are they they're probably having similar experiences.
And we have a group, and we try and get together, and we try and talk about what we're dealing with, what we're up against, and there's a lot of frustration. We talk and people are frustrated. And the sad thing is, I've had, peers, black peers who are in the education schools say, I don't want to do this. I'm frustrated. I'm fed up. There's too much limitation on what I can say, how I can express myself, what I can talk about. And I'm fed up. I don't want to do this. I don't think that I can work in this system. And so that brings us to what's wrong with the system.
So imagine you've had this powerful, this very empowering experience with Mr. Stovall, but imagine if you didn't, and you're on campus as a senior, and you're paired with another freshman coming in from the D.C. area, and they say, "Hey, Eric, I'm thinking about going into the School of Education." It would be so easy for an upperclassman to say to a new freshman, "You might want to think about it, because here's what you're going to run into." So you're helping to lay out things, because we have discussions. This next week, or in a few weeks, I'm going to be speaking to area school teachers, Madison Teachers Inc. and the Department of Public Instruction. They've contracted my organization Nehemiah to do a day-long training for their white teachers or non-black teachers. I won't say any names, but I want to just talk about the pressure that young students of color are under, because they're just thinking, and I've heard people say this. The one of the past presidents of Madison Teachers Inc. said on a radio show, "It's cold. There's not enough black people in Wisconsin. Like, what do you blame it? What are you looking at me for? This is why we don't have black teachers." Well, we have black people in Anchorage, Alaska, in Juneau, Alaska. Don't say that it's too cold here, that there are no black people here. It could be the environment. It could be the teachers. It could be what you're talking about today that could impede black students from really seeing themselves as educators. Because I think the best education happens when people are radical, because education in and of itself is radical. It catapults you to a new place. It has the potential of doing it economically, intellectually. And if people are just making it nice and are not allowing us to bring all of us to the table, then we're not going to sit at that table.
Yeah.
Man, that's pretty amazing. Would you ever consider teaching at an all-black school?
100%.
All-black male school?
100%.
Wow.
In fact, I'm leaning towards that.
Are you really?
Mm-hmm.
Would you ever start your own school?
Potentially.
Would you you want to stay at the middle school level? Do you see yourself maybe teaching younger or older ever, like down the road?
I like middle school.
It's a great age.
Yeah, it's a great age. It's a fun age. Crazy age. A lot going on. A lot of developmental stages at different stages throughout the room.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, a lot of hormones running around. But
sure.
It's that stage where you start the process of finding yourself. Start your journey. Start.
Sure.
Determining what you like, what you don't like,
Mm-hmm.
what interests you have, what interests you don't have. So it's fun. It's
Sure.
exciting. But I would consider teaching high school.
Okay.
I like older ages.
I love what you're saying about your experiences, particularly in your practicum and what you're about to experience as a student teacher. Then we have to add to all of that low pay and the other stuff that comes with the job. So we've got to do a better job as a nation, as a government. We just got to think about, one, how we attract more folks like you, how we treat folks like you, how we pay folks like you. Because for you to jump through all these hoops and then say, you going to pay me what? It just makes it very clear why we don't have more representation in our classroom. So when we get a chance to do things that talk about treating our teachers better, paying our teachers better for their worth, I think that we've got to really consider that. I talked to friends, who have told me that that around the world there are teachers that have YouTube channels that are teaching kids like how to prep for law school or taking SAT tests, and they're becoming independently wealthy because parents want to get the best teachers and want to get the best experience. And I haven't seen any of those YouTube channels, but I think it's brilliant that teachers are realizing, hey, if you don't pay me well here, I'm going to create some other venue for getting paid for my work, because they realize that the knowledge that they have is going to help our children become the next world leaders. Yep. And so we've got to really, really do a much better job of how we teach people in your profession, because so much, as you said, education is where people begin to establish their identity. And we can't keep looking at the problems in the world and not look at how we're educating or miseducating all children.
Precisely.
Wow. I am excited. When you and I were having coffee last week, I was able to introduce you to the principal of your new school. She and I grew up together. She is a brilliant educator, but the school where you're going to be doing your placements, Wright Middle School, we did not have a middle school in South Madison. So that school is historic, and it's named after someone who I consider to be a mentor of mine. James C. Wright was the pastor of Mount Zion Church. And I went to middle school with his kids, with his son, Coleman. His daughter was a little older. But I just want you to realize, and I know you've done your research on it, but there are a lot of folks who fought for that. Even back in the 80s, we fought for a school there. It's named after an African-American who worked in South Madison, lived in South Madison. In fact, the school is right on a creek. If you follow that creek towards Park Street, you'll find right on Gilson, there's a barber shop that James C. Wright used to work at, and his wife used to have the beauty parlor right next door. He worked for the city Equal Opportunity Commission for about 25 years. So there's so much hope that's been invested in that place. So I want you to know that although you're new to the Madison area because you came here for school, you're really tilling in soil that is really rich with the hopes and aspirations of historic Black folks who wanted their children to be educated on the South Side and not have to be bussed all over the place to do that. And so please keep that in mind. And when you do see Ms. Hicks, the principal there, please congratulate her for me, because she was just recognized nationally for the academic success of that program. And she is a brilliant educator. So so you've been following this rich tradition of Mr. Sellers and Mr. Stovall. Your expectations are not going to be lowered being around Dr. Hicks. So just know you are in good hands, and remind her that I know you. So listen, Eric, thank you so much for
Thank
being
you.
here, man. We are lucky to have someone with your passion and your intelligence and your commitment becoming an educator. So thank you for stopping by, for talking on this show. And I know that I have learned a lot by listening to you, and this is going to be very, very beneficial. So folks, thank you for participating again by listening in. And as always, I want you all to subscribe, to listen, to learn, to change, and to share this information. I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlich, my editor, Jeremy Holiday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Black like me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.